The global community is observing World Refugee Day today. Conflicts in Iraq, Syria, and Ukraine are creating waves of refugees, drawing renewed attention to the large number of displaced persons. Currently, there are at least 45 million displaced people, the highest level in the past 2 decades. VOA's Zlatica Hoke tells us more.
The number of refugees and internally displaced people in Iraq is growing. Iraqis who fled their homes after the 2003 Allied invasion were joined in recent years by Syrians. Large-scale displacement has resumed with Sunni insurgent attacks in Iraq's north. Many ethnic Turkmen have left the city of Tal Afar.
We were really afraid. We were afraid that a bomb would hit us or something, that something would happen to us. That's why we left.
Members of the Iraqi Turkmen Front say they will fight back.
The Turkmen are in a difficult situation in Tal Afar. An estimated 150,000 people have fled. They need help. They will never forget what is happening.
Syrian refugees in Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon are beginning to lose hope of ever returning home. Some of the children born there have never seen their country of origin. The head of the United Nations Refugee Agency, Antonio Guterres, visited some of the overcrowded camps this week.
We have only 20% of the Syrian children in Lebanon in formal education, in formal schools where they can get a diploma, where they can then use it for to move ahead in their lives. So it's very little what we are doing. We need much more support of the international community to the Syrian refugees, but also much more support for a country like Lebanon or Jordan, countries that are facing an enormous challenge.
Countries near conflict zones that host large groups of refugees can find caring for them a significant burden. Guterres is repeatedly calling for more donations from developed countries.
An attitude of compassion and solidarity from the international community in relation to the Syrian refugees and to the countries hosting them is needed more than ever. And what the international community is doing is very little compared with the suffering and the needs of the people we met, namely those that we met today.
While donors have difficulty satisfying the needs of existing refugees, new conflicts create new waves of displaced people. About 90,000 people have fled Pakistan's military offensive against militants in North Waziristan this month.
We fled because of the bombardment. When the jets started bombing and the gunship helicopters started bombing all over the place, we decided to flee.
According to the United Nations, during the last year alone, someone was forced to abandon his or her home every 4 seconds. But figures reveal only one aspect of this human tragedy. Conflict tears apart the lives of thousands of families. Nearly half of all refugees are below the age of 18, and a growing number are fleeing on their own. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
And since 1990, the number of refugees worldwide has decreased. Refugees in low-income countries increased from 52% to 57% between 2002 and 2012. And in 2002, there were 400,000 refugees in the DRC. By 2012, there were 500,000. Joining us now to discuss this dire situation is Mark Yarnell, a senior advocate at Refugee International. Mr. Yarnell, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
On a day like this, World Refugee Day, what is your organization's focus?
Well, we're trying to draw attention to the enormous needs of displaced people around the world. In addition to refugees, there's also people who are displaced internally. And while there's new conflicts and new sources of displacement, there's also some people who have been living in camps for up to 20 years or more. And so trying to share the diversity of challenges that are out there and appreciate programs like yours covering this issue.
And in Kenya, there are about 500,000 Somali refugees. You talked about some refugees that stay in camps for a long time. You were in Africa not long ago. There is the case of the DRC of Central African Republic. What have you seen in terms of some of the dire needs and priorities?
I think something that's quite tragic, especially in the case of South Sudan, is that we met a man who was living in an internal displacement camp named John in Juba. He'd been living as a refugee for 10 years in Uganda, finally felt that Juba was now safe enough and he could return home to South Sudan, returned to South Sudan. 2 days later, conflict broke out there. Now he's now living as an internal displaced person, unable to get to his home state in the north. So the new challenges that are there are compounding the old ones.
So it is true, it's clear that the return of refugees to their home is a challenge in terms of resettling.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and you know, certainly no one wants to live in a refugee camp forever, and especially when we visit the Somalis who are living in Dadaab in northern Kenya, they want to get back to Somalia, but when there's still violence and insecurity, they're unable to do so.
But to what extent do refugees really have the opportunity to resettle? I mean, very few of them are able to do that. Right?
Exactly, and that's why we have, especially in a place like Kenya, so many people who are still living in camps. It's not only that the country from which they've fled needs to be stable, but they also have to have economic opportunities to restart their livelihoods, to be able to begin their life again back where they fled from.
Many challenges. You spoke about economic opportunities. There are also their health, security, safety. All of these problems are there. Where do you start in terms of addressing them?
I mean, it's extremely challenging, and that's why, again, I think the attention on the crisis is so important, because you have to attack it from all different sides. At the very least, we hope that countries that are receiving refugees remain open, so that as people flee, they're able to cross borders into safety. But then once there, there's the importance of the international community to provide support to those people, because often the host countries don't have the resources to do it themselves.
Now, in Kenya, a framework has been put in place to enable Somalis refugees to return to their countries. But how is this feasible? How is it realistic in the sense that there is still a situation of conflict in the country?
Exactly. There's some parts of Somalia that have become stable, but many parts are still very insecure. Over the past few months, 70,000 new people have been, or new displacement has occurred because of violence there. And so while some people are interested to voluntarily return, we really hope that Kenya will maintain the space for people to keep living in Kenya until Somalia is actually safe.
And very quickly, moving forward, what will be Refugee International's priorities?
We'll actually be going to Kenya next month to visit refugees there and to make sure that, that those who are in Kenya are able to live with support and dignity.
Great. Mr. Yarnell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And that was Mark Yarnell. He's a senior advocate at Refugee International. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com.